Good evening, Democrats. I'm Lauren Calmet, Political Director of the Florida Democratic Party. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Meet the Candidates episode featuring some of our wonderful candidates in Broward, Palm Beach, and St. Lucie counties. We are incredibly excited to introduce you to these dedicated Democrats who are ready to flip Florida blue. First up, we are going to meet three Democrats from Broward County. Linda Thompson Gonzalez running for House District 93, Christine Hunschofsky running for House District 96, and Joe Scott for Broward County Supervisor of Elections. And before we dive in, I would be remiss if I did not offer some congratulations to Christine, who is actually no longer a candidate. New information has come through since we had initially invited her. But Christine, would you please share with us some of the great news that you had recently heard?
Lauren, thank you so much. Yes, I recently got a call from the Division of Elections, and they told me that my opponent had withdrawn from the race, and therefore I am no longer in a campaign mode. So I am now considered representative-elect, and I'm very grateful for all the support and ready to get to work after the election.
Absolutely. Well, regardless of the fact that you are no longer a candidate, we are still thrilled to have you on today's program and to introduce you to some of your constituents. For anyone who has not yet had the chance to meet the representative-elect, she was born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, and has lived in Parkland, Florida for over 20 years with her husband and their two sons. She has volunteered and been active in her community for many years, serving on the Parkland Education Advisory Board for 7 years and the District 2 Parkland City Commission from March of 2013 to November 2016, and then also as mayor of Parkland from November 2016 until just about now. So, Christine, let's. I guess we'll kick the first question to you since you're flying high this week. Your district is adjacent to the Everglades. What environmental policy would you like to accomplish in your first term as a state rep?
Thank you so much, Lauren, for asking that question, and thank you for having me here and giving me this opportunity to let my constituents and the Broward County area know a little bit more about me. Water issues are they are very important as Florida continues to grow in population. One of the bills that Kristen Jacobs, she was our state representative who formerly sat in the seat and unfortunately lost her 3-year battle with cancer earlier this year. She was a good friend of mine, as she was with so many wonderful people in Broward County, and she was a strong environmentalist. And last session, she introduced a bill that would require a water needs assessment for the state of Florida. The idea being, how can you come up with legislation to plan and have enough funding until you know and properly assess what your water needs are? So this is one of the bills that I would like to introduce in the upcoming session so that we have a 5-year comprehensive plan on what all our needs are with water so that we can plan for that going forward.
Thank you, Christine. And while we're on this subject, I'd like to introduce, and we'll be back with you, Christine, but while we're on this subject, Linda, I know that this is a topic that you're passionate about as well. For our viewers tonight who have not yet had the chance to meet her, Linda Thompson Gonzalez definitely has the experience to lead us through the crisis we now face. As a former Assistant Inspector General at the U.S. Department of State, she held public officials accountable. As a senior Foreign Service officer, she led her teams through national crisis to deliver the tools people need to rebuild their lives. And as an attorney for small businesses, she can help get us on a path to economic recovery. So Linda, while we're in this conversation about the environment, we know that District 93 is ground zero for sea level rise and has been identified by the Climate Cabinet as one of the top 40 legislative races in the country for climate impact. What do you plan to do about sea level rise if you are elected? Linda, you are on mute.
There we go. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak to the voters. Yes, we in District 93 are at ground zero for sea level rise, and it is flooding our streets as we speak with this king tide and our homes. You know, the rising sea levels threatening our homes, our life savings, our clean water, and our future. We've heard a lot of lip service from Tallahassee, but with beach renourishment and seawalls, are buying us time, but we need a real plan, a real statewide comprehensive plan that will really directly address the climate change that's causing our seas to rise. The Sierra Club, the Vote Water, the Climate Covenant have all endorsed me because they know I have a plan to help the Sunshine State really harness the forces of nature with clean energy that is now really cheaper than fossil fuels and produces jobs 5 times faster than the old technologies that have been polluting our water and polluting our air. So in the wake of COVID, we have an opportunity to put in action a plan for carbon neutrality by 2050 that will really directly address our climate change. And it is a plan in the wake of COVID that is more economically viable than ever before. So I'm looking forward to working with Christine and others in Tallahassee to directly address our sea level rise, keep our water clean, and keep our Everglades restoration strong so that we can have the Florida that we all know and love. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Linda. We could certainly use more advocates for the environment in the state legislature. And Linda, I never pick favorites, but I will say that I live in your district, so I hope to be a constituent of yours very soon.
Thank you. I think that this. Thank you.
Next up, let's turn to Joe Scott. He is the Democratic nominee for Supervisor of Elections in Broward County. He graduated from West Point, where he studied computer science and cybersecurity, and also served in Iraq as an Army captain and earned his MBA from Villanova University, bringing a wealth of leadership experience and technology to this new role. Joe, can you please share with us a little bit about what your highest priority would be once taking office?
Sure, Lauren, and thanks for having me on. It's great to have the opportunity to address Florida Democrats alongside my neighbors, my mayor, Christine Hunschofsky, as well as my good friend, Linda Thompson Gonzalez. So you asked about my top priority. I believe as Supervisor of Elections, it's critical more than anything else that we ensure the security of our elections here in Broward County. As Supervisor of Elections, I'll be responsible for making sure that every voter in Broward County has an opportunity to participate in our system. And it's also my responsibility to make sure that no outside actors are able to come in and interfere with our election system, either on the front end by interfering with people trying to suppress the vote here in Broward County, but also on the back end and making sure that people aren't interfering in our system, in our networks, and making sure that the numbers are reported exactly as the people of Broward County have voted. And, you know, so that'll be my number one priority as your Supervisor of Elections.
Thank you, Joe. And I'd like to turn it back to one of the folks here who has served many years as a local elected official. Christine, what are some of the things that you've learned on a local level that you'd like to bring to Tallahassee?
Thanks for that question. I think sometimes people get so caught up in the policy, they don't really look at how it's affecting people on the ground. As a local elected official, we are accessible to the community all the time, whether we're shopping in Publix, whether we're on the fields, whether we're walking down the street. And having that interaction really shapes policy and makes policy better. So I think it's important on the state level to also continue with that local outreach so that local voices are being heard in the policy that's being made, that we are not accidentally making policy that might have negative effects on people that were kind of unforeseen. So I'm hoping to really bring that outreach from a local level and the local experience to the state level.
Thank you. And just one last question. It has now been over 2 years since the tragic shooting at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School. What more do you think that the state could do in the aftermath of this tragedy?
Yeah, so after Stoneman Douglas, we had some good reforms, including more funding toward mental health. We also had red flag laws were implemented in our state, which were very necessary. From a gun violence prevention standpoint, I definitely think we need to be working on universal background checks. They are well regarded as helping to keep guns out of the hands of people who would do harm to themselves or someone else. But in the aftermath of the tragedy, it became very apparent what an incredible and negative effect unaddressed trauma has on people and on a community. And you don't just experience trauma when you go through something like a mass shooting, but there is everyday trauma. People have losses in their lives. And I think as a state, we need to do a better job with mental health services, with accessible and affordable quality mental health services, and working on addressing trauma. The long-term effects of not addressing mental health issues and not addressing trauma are incredible on the economy, on productivity, and just overall health of our cities and our communities. And I really think we need to work on that, because by building up our communities and making our communities stronger, we're actually making our whole state better.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Christine. And we know that you'll take your experience and your leadership and your advocacy for our shared values up to Tallahassee. So I'm very excited to see you up there.
Thank you so much.
Linda, of course, we know that you're also running for the state legislature, and you also have a very robust background. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you plan to use your experience as a former Assistant Inspector General to the benefit of our Florida voters, if elected to go to Tallahassee?
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much. Yes, I served for many years as an Assistant Inspector General at the U.S. Department of State. In that capacity, I was working to oversee our taxpayer dollars so that we get the most benefit out of our taxpayer dollars to fight fraud, waste, and abuse. But also, part of our work is to oversee our programs, to ensure that our government is working to the maximum extent to serve our people. I also, in my capacity as Assistant Inspector General, worked very closely with the U.S. Congress on legislation on a bipartisan basis so that we could have legislation that met people's needs and served our public. One of the things that we know throughout the state that has been in so many headlines is our broken unemployment system. It's been a tragedy. It's the failure of our state government, our Republican-led legislature, and our governor to address this issue has led to untold tragedy and human suffering. We've had 3 audits in recent years of our broken unemployment system. It was a system that was designed from the get-go by another Republican governor to fail our people. And so as an Inspector General, with those skills to bring accountability and better management to our government, I hope to bring to Tallahassee a realization that we need to fix our broken systems, whether it's our broken pipes here locally in District 93 or a broken unemployment system. We have an obligation to the people we serve to go back to work, to get it right, to have services that work, that are accessible, that meet people's needs, especially in this moment of crisis. We have an incumbent who actually wrote an editorial about the need to fix our broken unemployment system. At the same time, he voted no for the special session earlier this year that would have fixed our broken unemployment system. So we have a lot of talk, but we don't have leadership. We don't have dedication. We have a lot of legislators who are not serving their function, and they are missing in action. And we need legislators who will go to work, stay at work, and fix these broken systems for the people. We deserve better. We are sending a lot of taxpayer dollars to Tallahassee. We deserve those taxpayer dollars to work for our people. So as a former Assistant Inspector General, I intend to make those systems, fix those broken systems, make those systems work for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. And you know, one thing that's come up a number of times as I'm having these conversations with candidates is how much these broken systems are now under a microscope with COVID-19. So while we're on the subject of COVID-19, Joe, I'm curious to hear your take. How will the COVID-19 crisis impact voting this year?
Oh yeah, Lauren, that's a really great question. The biggest impact that we'll see this year is that a lot more people are going to decide to vote from home and vote by mail, whichever term you prefer. I actually like the vote from home term. I believe this is a change that really needs to happen for our system in order to really increase voter turnout and also to just make the system more effective. You know, I love the idea of voters taking their time, sitting around the dining room table with ballots, filling it out, and being able to return their ballots on their own time, and eliminating that need for people to stand in line and to potentially expose themselves to the virus in order to vote. So this fall, we will see a huge change. We already saw it in the primary, and we'll see it to an even greater degree this fall, where a lot more people are going to choose to vote by mail. And as a result, our systems are going to have to keep up with the times and make sure that we're adapting to this new reality. Because even after, you know, COVID has passed, I believe that people are going to see the benefits and trust our vote by mail system a little bit more than they did in the past, and that vote by mail will be here to stay, and people will be voting from home in much bigger numbers far into the future. Now, as far as when we talk about at our actual polling stations, you know, what I saw during the primary, you know, I felt like they did a really good job of making sure that the poll workers had the right PPE in place. And that's obviously something that we will continue as long as necessary to make sure that the poll workers have proper PPE, to make sure that we're providing the signage in place, to make sure that people are reminded to wear their masks when they come to a polling place, and that they keep proper distancing from the voters while standing in line, and also keep proper distancing at all times while they're inside of the building of the polling place. So there's just these type of changes as far as that I think most people are starting to see everywhere that they go in public. And everybody's just going to have to get up to date and keep up with the new times and the new systems.
Thank you, Joe. And, you know, I think that it's impossible to have a conversation about COVID-19 without also leaning into a conversation about access to healthcare. So, Linda, you know, I understand that you are in support of expanding Medicaid. Can you talk to us a little bit about why you believe that this is so important?
Yes, you know, we've needed to expand Medicaid for so long. Even before the COVID crisis, we had 46,000 families in Florida that could not meet their basic needs of health care, of course, but of rent, of food, of putting clothing on their children. That was even before COVID hit. And we had families who were a $400 unanticipated expense away from economic financial disaster. So now we are in a situation with COVID, which is an enormous healthcare crisis. We have, I think Florida is the third largest state in the country with the highest number of uninsured people. We have 2.7, almost 3 million people who do not have health insurance. So, but our leaders in Tallahassee have continued to fail to ignore this, and they have refused to expand Medicaid. And why is Medicaid so important for us? Because it would provide federal dollars that would provide the health care that our people need. Those are federal dollars that would replace state funds. The state could take those federal dollars to use them for other programs. Right now, the state is paying for mental health, for all sorts of things that the federal dollars could be paying for. In addition, the federal dollars would pay for the health insurance to help our people get the preventive health care they need. You know, expanding Medicaid is such a common sense, no-brainer that will help Florida, help us get our feet both health-wise, save lives, save money. It's just incredible that they have not taken this action to help our people. So I really will fight to expand Medicaid and give the Floridians the preventive health care that they need. It costs everyone less. It saves all of us money. It would put federal dollars into our state revenues and really help our budget crisis that we're going to come in when we get through this COVID crisis. And people don't think about that. We've got to look at all of our people and all of our resources. You know, I'll just say one more thing. I was overseas for 12 years with the Foreign Service, and we had bombings, kidnappings. We had all sorts of national crises every other day overseas, and we worked right through those crises to help people and deliver the services and the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. But one of the first things that we all learned in crisis management is you must take care of people first. You know, we've had a healthcare crisis that has, because of the lack of leadership in Tallahassee, we've had a healthcare crisis that has turned into a humanitarian tragedy, and there's no need for it. If we had focused on taking care of our people first, mandating the masks were a simple step that would have saved so many thousands of lives. It is a tragedy because of the lack of leadership. So healthcare is fundamental for all Floridians, for our healthcare, our well-being, and our future. We need to expand Medicaid. We need to focus on taking care of our people first. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. You definitely have my vote.
Thank you.
And speaking of voting, Joe, can you please share with us what is the plan to improve voter turnout in Broward County?
So, I believe at this point that we've seen from other jurisdictions and what's gone on in other parts of the country that improving our vote by mail system will increase voter turnout. And there's a few very basic, simple things that we can do. And primarily, I would say it has to do with improving the system to begin with, and then improving communication. There are trust issues, especially here in Broward County, with using our vote by mail system. And that's because there were real problems that need to be addressed. So once we address those real problems, we need to communicate with voters and make sure that they understand that the problems have been fixed and explain exactly what we're doing to continuously improve our system. The improved communications could be that we start using whatever method the voter wants, whether it be text message, email, robocalls, or we can create an app that they download that sends push notifications to people's phones. And what we would do with these notifications is notify people when their vote by mail ballot has been sent out, when they should have received the vote by mail ballot, when it's time to send it back, when it's actually too late to send it back, and where your nearest drop box location that you can take it and drop it off at. So when it comes to drop boxes, we actually need to expand drop boxes and make sure that we have drop boxes in more locations around the county, more accessible to more people. So it's really a number of different things that we can do to improve that system. And when we do, we'll see an increase in voter turnout. If we make the system more accessible and more easy to use, we'll see voter turnout go up. It's really simple, and there's basic steps that we can take. And we're going to need the help of the Florida legislature, because in some cases we're going to have to change some of the laws that were put in place to keep voter suppression, to keep our votes down.
Mm-hmm.
But once we do that, we'll be able to expand access to the ballot and get more people involved in our system.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for joining us tonight, and also thank you so much for your service to our country.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate that.
Thank you also to Linda Thompson Gonzalez and Christine Hunschofsky for joining us as well. It has been so great to chat with each of you. And those are just a few of our wonderful candidates in Broward County. Next up, we're going to meet some of our candidates from St. Lucie County. We're going to meet Dr. Corinna Balderramos Robinson, running for Senate District 25, Kathryn Hensley for St. Lucie County School Board District 4, and Henry Duhart for St. Lucie County Commission District 5. Hello, and welcome to the show to these wonderful Democrats. First off, hello, thank you again for making the time to to join us. Before we get going, I'll just introduce each of you quickly to our viewers tonight. Dr. Corinna Balderramos Robinson is a proven leader, combat veteran, mother, and educator, having directed protection programs for the Pentagon, served in legislative positions abroad, and is the CEO and founder of a small business. She always runs to the sound of the guns. Thank you, Corinna, for joining us. She is right up here in the red shirt. We also have with us Kathryn Hensley. She is a former educator, lifelong child and family advocate, and leader in innovations in St. Lucie County, such as the Treasure Coast Research Park, the Marine Oceanographic Academy, Emerging Technologies Cultural Art Academy of St. Lucie, and many more. Under her leadership, the graduation for all students has soared, with the traditional schools reaching 96.5%, in a county with 75% of the students on subsidized or free lunches, and in one of the most diverse parts of Florida. We also have Henry Duhart. He is the Democratic nominee for the St. Lucie County Commission District 5 seat. He is young and progressive, and he is the change that the community needs right now. He is a product of the village, and he envisions St. Lucie to be a place where everybody is safe, healthy, and working. So Henry, why don't we start off with you, because I know that you have a very strong vision for your community. Henry, when we talk about progressivism, we often think about national politics and overlook local politics. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of having progressive leaders in our local offices, and why it's important for you to represent progressives on your campaign?
Well, for me, I label myself as a progressive because of my views. I'm more closely aligned with the section of that part of the Democratic Party. Progressives believe in a number of things, but what draws me in the most is their dedication to grassroots politics. I deeply admire this commitment to running a people-funded campaign rather than a corporation or corporate-based campaign. Progressive leadership is needed in St. Lucie County and on the local level, because we need someone who is willing to take those bold steps. Our county and our country has been afraid of those big changes sometimes. I'm not. So it's very important to have progressive leaders so that not only they can get ahead of the change, but they can embrace the change and allow the people within their communities to experience that progression.
Thank you so much, Henry. And I think that when talking about like progressivism and the values of our party in general, I think that we're all on the same page about equity. So a huge part of equity is access to education. So Kathryn, I'd like to talk to you a little bit. Can you share with us a little bit about what your plan would be to provide equity and pathways to all students in your district?
We found many years ago that there was a lack of equity in our district. It was a misunderstanding what equality and equity were. So we put some things in place, and we have been working on that. I worked on that before I got on the school board. Well, we found out that one group of our students had a 55% graduation rate. That's totally unacceptable. Now they have a 98% graduation rate. We put things in place to make sure we met the needs of individual students to take them as far as we can. With the pandemic, we knew that we had a lot of kids, because of our poverty level, didn't have access to the internet and didn't have access to devices. We made sure that every one of our students has a device, and we have buses parked all over the county that are Wi-Fi accessible for areas where they didn't have Wi-Fi. So we've been trying to be very diligent to make sure that we basically put the child in the middle of the table, find out what that child needs, and then go find those resources for the child.
Thank you, Kathryn. And the issues that you've touched upon, as I had said with our last group, are now being magnified due to COVID-19. So Dr. Balderramos Robinson, I'd like to turn to you quickly as we talk about the tragic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. What can you as a future state senator do to promote a safe and secure recovery?
Great question, Lauren. With a PhD in management, concentrating on homeland security, I authored a dissertation on legislative decision-making. I noted that it was critical that legislators vote in the best interest of constituents without regard to special interests. As a state senator, I will glean from advisors who appreciate science and full transparency in their reporting. With over 13,317 confirmed COVID-19 deaths reported across Florida today, I will seek to chair committees that will find common ground across party lines to save lives. I have been certified in emergency management and often work with local, state, and federal officials, interagency, and foreign nations for preparation or response to crisis operations. I am not a stranger to wearing PPE for months on end. For example, in Iraq and Washington, D.C., as I commanded a unit in response to the 9/11 terrorist attack. Our first responders, teachers, business employees, everyone needs appropriate funding to keep their establishments safe.
Thank you. And, of course, we love to see a well-educated, well-researched candidate who believes in science. And speaking of science, Kathryn, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about kind of what's going on with reopening of schools, because we know that there's a lot of research there, and that's not necessarily always shown in the decision that some current legislative leaders are making. So what's your stance on what's going on with the reopening of school campuses, and what has been done to address the safety and health of students, staff, and faculty?
Opening school campuses was a very big discussion. As you know, we received a mandate from the state to open our campuses. So we scrambled and actually had started putting things in place to make sure that we were ready to address that. We have 45% of our kids are back in brick and mortar. The rest are on live streaming. So we have redone all of our systems, but in-house, all of our air conditioning systems, all of our fans. We have very strict protocols about no volunteers, no visitors, all that sort of thing. We put in a mask ordinance. We put in a mask ordinance in March as a mandate within the school district, so that anybody that was going anywhere that belonged to the school district was supposed to be wearing a mask. So we have all of our kids wear masks. We haven't had any pushback from that. We have deep cleaning every 24 hours. We have all those things being touched multiple times during the day. We've done every protocol that we can with the best CDC guidelines in tandem with our health department. Although their voice has been curbed, their behind the scenes voice has not been. So we have done everything we can to make sure our kids are safe and our faculty is safe, whether on a bus, whether in a classroom, whether they are doing live streaming from a closet, to try to make sure that we have everything in place, every protocol, that if this happens, this is what we do. We have multiple clinics at every school. So we can't stop things, but we can address them very, very quickly. And we've been able to control a lot of things within the system in the last couple of weeks already.
Thank you, Kathryn. This is a topic that we have heard so much discussion over, especially from our Democratic leaders. So speaking of Democrats, Henry, I'd like to turn to you because I understand that you're in an interesting position. Your opponent only a few years ago was a Democrat. So considering that you were both part of the same party only 4 years ago, what genuinely differentiates you from each other?
Well, there's actually a lot that differentiates us from each other. However, I believe that the largest difference that voters need to be aware of is the difference in our stances on the coronavirus. So my opponent was the only county commissioner to vote against the mask mandate. She simply has not taken the virus seriously. I believe it is imperative we elect leadership that will put its citizens first. And within our actual mission statement that when you're sworn in as a county commissioner, one of the things talks about someone who protects the safety and sustainability of our communities. And that a lot of times it means you have to make those hard decisions that sometimes doesn't have to do with party, but has to do with the people. And I'll make the best decisions for the people's safety in our county. And, so for me, I believe it is imperative that we elect leadership that puts its citizens first and institutes new ideas and initiatives to ensure the safety and the health of each individual. One of my COVID plans is to create a COVID-19 committee whose main focus is to help the community move forward with and after the virus. So that's one of the biggest differences between me and my opponent, that I support the safety of our community, especially the safety of the seniors in our community. Me being someone who, my grandfather recently passed. Of course, he had COVID. He did have existing conditions, but COVID really didn't make it any better. So the fact that my opponent was someone who's against the mask mandate, that in effect harms the seniors of our community is something I stand against, and I will stand for the seniors and everybody in our community for safety.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that, Henry, and my condolences to your family. And of course, while we're talking about COVID-19, many of us here believe that healthcare is a human right and must be affordable to everyone, especially in a time of crisis. So, Dr. Balderramos Robinson, how can more of your constituents from
Well, when the Biden-Harris team gets to the White House and others down the ballot, we will help repair the shortfalls of our governor. I will fight to expand Medicaid, which would provide immediate aid to so many families that are currently uninsured throughout Florida. And our recovery will be managed by crediting scientific analysis. As Kathryn mentioned before, it really was a brash mandate for the schools to reopen, and how we had to work through that process. And even, my time at Kaiser University, where I'm a program director, where there's adults versus children, it was a challenge. But I work hard in working with the businesses and and reopening the beaches and the parks and the restaurants, and just to make sure that we're being careful until a vaccine is available. And as you know, that won't be anytime soon. But we have to continually thwart the COVID-19 virus, and making sure our processes are transparent, that the reporting is available for everyone so they know truly where we're at risk. And additionally, I just believe that women deserve, in this whole, crisis that's ongoing, that they still need access to reproductive health care services, and definitely mental health services for everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Kathryn, I'd like to turn back to you, speaking of all of these different issues. We have heard many times, again, that vocational and technical education have become a political issue. So what have you done to prepare students for the needs of the current and the future workplace?
Under Governor Bush, it was he determined that everybody needed to get a college degree. So a lot of things pivoted. We put together years later a task force through our Chamber of Commerce and our business community, as well as educators. Actually, I was the only educator on there, I guess. But we put together a plan to create the research coast and focus on what the needs of our community and our region was going to be. We took that document back, and we actually retooled every one of our high schools to meet what was projected to be the future needs of workforce. So we have 52 certification programs and 26 academies. And we are meeting the needs of most of our workforce right now, but they need to be ready to pivot and move forward. So I have been able to pull together a task force to look at building trades, to look at manufacturing, to look at the bio, to look at actually the agricultural based programs too with the University of Florida. So we have put a lot of things in place that will serve for our kids now. When they come out, they can go right into work, or that if they choose not to do that, they can go into college with a higher standing. So we've been able to pull entities together to build collaborations and to make sure that the soft skills are addressed as well as the actual technical skills. So that's been exciting, and that's been part of what led us to the research part, to the Marine Oceanographic Academy, to a variety of those specialized programs. We actually have a gaming academy, and that's pretty exciting, although I don't understand the 15-year-olds when they're explaining it to me. But we know there's a pathway for that. So we look to see what the pathways are within the next 10, 15, and 20 years, and we make sure our curriculum is preparing our students to be able to walk into those workplaces at an advanced level with a certificate and start at a higher rate of pay.
Thank you so much, Kathryn. And of course, preparing our students for the next step is an absolute priority to Democrats. Speaking of which, Henry, could you please share with us a little bit about what experience you have that will be relevant to your next position? Because we have heard many times your opponent making a pretty big deal about qualifications. So we'd like to hear a little bit about what you're bringing to the table.
So I'm actually very glad that you asked me this question. I have been fortunate enough to work within the political sector and in advocacy and grassroots organization over the last 4 years. And that experience with working as an operations director for Progressive Turnout Project and former presidential candidates Tom Steyer and Andrew Yang has put me in a situation where I was able in handling large amounts of money. Progressive Turnout Project works with about a $70 million budget from grassroots funds. And as an operations manager, it was my duty to oversee tasks and make sure that the investments that were made into getting out the vote in our county were yielding the desired results. So I'm a young man who has gladly gone through and happily been a part of this public school system. So believe in the youth, believe in the seeds that you invested in. We have the power, we have the understanding and the know-how. And my love for activism catapulted me into this political spectrum where I was able to work for Andrew Yang and be in New Hampshire for 4 or 6 months and work for Tom Steyer and become an operations director here in St. Lucie County and hire 25 people locally who were usually doing canvassing stuff for free, but we were able to give them living wage opportunities while also doing what they love. So my experience speaks for itself, and I continue to learn more experiences. And I'm looking forward to not only being the youngest county commissioner in St. Lucie County, but the most impactful county commissioner through my mentors that I have made throughout the last couple of years.
Wow, thank you, Henry. And I didn't know that you were Yang Gang. Henry Yang's book, The War on Regular People, literally changed my life. So I'm excited to hear that you're also familiar with his vision for our country. Dr. Balderramos Robinson, of course, we cannot move on to the next session without addressing environmental issues. So of critical importance across Florida is protecting our families, waterways, and lands from environmental hazards. So what legislative actions are necessary to better do so?
Well, thank you, Lauren. We all know how important the environment is here in Florida. I'm grateful to have the endorsement of both the Sierra Club and the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida. I will strive to develop a plan to convert Florida to 100% renewable clean energy. I know it will take some time, but it's doable. I'll support full funding of the acquisition portion of the Florida Land and Water Legacy Amendment, estimated at $487 million for 2020. And, that will help take care of open space lands. I'll work closely with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to provide transparency and reporting on how they help control pollution in Lake Okeechobee. I worked with them before in the Pentagon, so they're friends, and of course they're Army, so we'll all get along. And I'll oppose any advanced recovery methods for the extraction of oil or natural gas in Florida. Let's replace our state-owned vehicles with electrical vehicles and plenty of places to plug them in. And lastly, I would just require all new public and commercial buildings to the best extent possible to be compliant with LEED or similar sustainable building standards. Lots of work to do.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. I'd say so. And the state legislature is certainly a wonderful place to start. Thank you so much for not only for joining us, but also for your service to our country. It's been so great to get to know you tonight. These were our candidates from the St. Lucie County area: Dr. Corinna Balderramos Robinson for State District 25, Kathryn Hensley for St. Lucie County District Board Seat 4, and Henry Duhart for St. Lucie County Commission District 5. Thank you again to our candidates for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you.
Next up, we are going to meet two incredible Democrats from the Palm Beach area. We have Jim Bonfiglio running for House District 89 and Jim Carroll running for House District 85. Welcome to the show. So great to see both of you again.
Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Thank you. Thank you. So before we get going with our questions, I'll introduce both of the Jims to our viewers for tonight. Jim Bonfiglio is the former mayor of Ocean Ridge and is the candidate that almost won in 2018 if folks had voted down ballot. He is a gun sense candidate endorsed by many major environmental organizations and a true feminist. Good to see you, Mayor. Thank you for joining.
Hi, thank you so very much for having me here today to go through some of the issues in State House District 89.
Thank you.
Surprising fact of State House District 89 is that the current most famous Republican in the country is one of my voters. Donald Trump Mar-a-Lago is in State House District 89. So come November 4, Donald Trump is going to be the former president, represented by President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, vice president in Washington, and Jim Bonfiglio in Tallahassee.
There we go. I'm not sure if you're counting on President Trump's vote or not.
Well, we were doing a postcard campaign welcoming all the newly registered voters to District 89, and when we saw that President Trump and Melania Trump had registered in the District 89, we sent them welcoming postcards inviting them to help flip Florida District 89 blue. So maybe we'll get that vote.
Yeah, I mean, I have a hunch that the president is voting straight ticket red, but Melania, I actually think she might be a persuadable voter.
well, 1 out of 2 isn't bad, I guess. Average.
Absolutely. Next, also with us, we have Jim Carroll. He has spent the last 3 years involved full-time in community service. He has been serving on government boards and committees dealing with infrastructure and assisting people who cannot afford an attorney. Jim Carroll, why don't we start off with you? What would you do to address the effects of climate change on House District 85?
Well, first of all, thanks, Laura. Nice to be with you. Thanks for the opportunity to participate. First, I would say climate change is not an issue on the horizon. Of course, it's an issue now. Hurricanes are more powerful, our beaches are eroding, and flooding is more prevalent. We need the state to tackle this issue in earnest now. And yet, for the most part, the state really isn't doing very much. This year, my opponent and his colleagues let a bill die in the House that would have created a state office of resiliency and a sea level rise task force that would have finally at least started addressing climate change and sea level rise in Florida. They did this even though the Senate, just a few days beforehand, approved the bill, 38-0. Florida is really ground zero in the U.S. for sea level rise. We need to overhaul our flood control systems, build seawalls, raise roads, and systematically replenish our beaches and dunes. We also need to, of course, convert to a renewable energy society as quickly as we possibly can. So in short, we have to tackle climate change and sea level rise right now. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And Mayor Bonfiglio, while we're on this subject, I'd be curious to hear also what you've seen and what your plan would be to address intercoastal flooding and sea level rising.
Okay, great question, because yesterday, if you lived in Palm Beach County, especially along the intercoastal, the District 89 is the entire intercoastal from the Boca Broward line all the way up through Singer Island, about halfway through up north through Singer Island. Encompasses all that intercoastal area. If you lived there yesterday, we had a moderate to heavy rain event for about 24 hours. And as I was coming home from work in Boynton Beach across the Ocean Avenue Bridge, you could see there was a huge flood, which if you live in that area and you go across that bridge, you see it all the time. The water was actually up to and higher than the undercarriages of the cars. And so you had to do a narrow path across, taking the middle of the road to get the highest apex of the road to avoid the deep water. As you cross the bridge, you could see the king tide, where the water was actually up to the walls, the seawalls all along the intercoastal. So we had a double event. We had a difficult, a heavy rain event plus a king tide, which caused this flooding. The reason for the flooding is that when you have the drainage going into the intercoastal from your retention detention ponds, like we did that project in Ocean Ridge when I was on Planning and Zoning Commission, we had to clear flooding out of about 35 acres of our town. You create these retention detention ponds with a gravity feed. The water flows in one end and it takes about 30 days You get dirty water in and clean water goes out through a filtering system. And the gravity feed drains into the intercoastal. Well, when it drains into the intercoastal, the high tides block, it's water and it blocks the discharge. When you actually drive up and down the intercoastal in a boat, look at all the seawalls and you can see the discharge pipes. Many times they're 2 and 3, sometimes even 4 feet below the high water mark. You can see the high water mark on the seawalls. So that's what's blocking the drainage, and you need to address that issue because the flooding is an economic problem. It's an economic problem because, and that's how I intend to sell it to the Republican colleagues when I get in the legislature, because if you live in an area that gets constantly flooded, your home values are going to go down. Mm-hmm. Your insurance premiums are going to go up because you're going to have more events where you're going to get flood damage in your house. Municipalities and counties are going to suffer because property values go down, and as property values go down, the tax base decreases. So, and if they can't make the tax base up from homeowners, they're going to have to search someplace else to make up the money. So it's a huge economic problem that can be solved if you deal with saltwater intrusion, sea level rise, and all the attendant problems. And in talking about sea level rise, that we have a detention pond. Actually, the pond is right behind my house, so I can monitor it frequently. We have to clean it out about every 12 or so years to get all the stuff that's collected in there out and make it run efficiently. You have to measure the fresh water table that exists because because we have limestone, which is a porous rock, so salt water intrudes, and then your fresh water sits on top of the salt water because it's lighter. It doesn't have the salt in it, so it sits on top of that. Well, when we cleaned it out, we remeasured the height of the fresh water table, and it increased 2 to 3 inches, and that's the saltwater intrusion pushing up the fresh water table. And so it's just like a sink. If you have a shallower sink, it can hold less water. So you're going to have to make these detention ponds bigger to hold more water. And obviously, if you live along the intercoastal, either one side or the other of the intercoastal, you know that there are very few buildable lots. So we're going to have to figure out a way to get lots, open lots, in order to create these detention ponds to hold the runoff from the heavy rain events. And that's going to be an expensive problem. It's going to be a difficult problem for the intercoastal communities, and it's going to require funding from the state in order to meet those costs. I think our retention pond cost about $12 or $15 million, and that was about 2002, 2003, and we had no land acquisition costs because the town owned the lot on which we built the retention pond. So when you throw in land acquisition costs, you throw in some inflation, possibly may have to not only pump water into the retention pond, but pump the water out because it won't be able to operate on a gravity feed or limited operation on a gravity feed. So it's really going to be an expensive proposition for intercoastal communities to deal with the flooding that is attendant with sea level rise and saltwater intrusion.
Sure.
Yeah, and we also have, I've also experienced with beach restoration, beach renourishment. This entire community has oceanfront land, and we'll even have to deal with beach erosion at Mar-a-Lago because, unfortunately, that is one of the constituents that we have. But I'm familiar with all those problems. We have to preserve our dunes because the dunes minimize the effect of hurricanes and the storm surges that come through. They are protected by all the vegetation on the dunes, and if you don't have the dunes, you have a much more significant hurricane event that causes flooding and damage to the properties. And again, it's an economic issue.
Sure. So while we're on this topic about clean water, let's turn to Jim to continue this conversation. Jim Carroll, what would you do to ensure clean waterways in HD 85?
Well, first I would say a healthy environment, clean water. That's why we're here in Florida. That's what our tourist and real estate economy is built on. Yet our waterways are polluted. They're too often choked by algae. and our state government, including my opponent, are doing little to fix it. My opponent has never introduced or sponsored a bill requiring reduction in pollution in our waterways. In fact, the only pollution-related bill that my opponent was involved with before this year, unfortunately, was a bill to allow so-called treated sewage to be poured into Florida's drinking water aquifers. Even Governor Scott realized that that was a no-go, and he vetoed that bill. That brings me to this year's Clean Waterways Act that was passed by the legislature and signed by the governor in June. Judging by attendance at the bill's signing, my opponent was the act's biggest supporter. He was the only legislator at the signing. But the act, which is supposed to clean up our waterways, is really a non-starter and really needs a do-over with significant amendments in the next session. The Clean Waterways Act that was passed doesn't require any reduction in agriculture pollution, which is by far the biggest contaminator of our waterways and causes over twice the amount of pollution to enter our waterways than the next two major sources of pollution in the state, which are sewage systems and septic tanks. The bill, speaking of those items, does virtually nothing to require reductions in septic tank or sewage system leakage either. So the bill is really a failure, and it needs to be fixed. It does some little things, but on the major things that the Clean Waterways Act was passed to address, clean water, it doesn't do it. So the Clean Waterways Act needs a redo without delay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And of course, another topic that we just have to touch upon is COVID-19. And amidst all of the pain that COVID-19 is inflicting in Floridians have also been presented with a broken unemployment system. So Mayor Bonfiglio, let's turn back to you. What is your plan to address this broken system and restore jobs?
Well, the problem with the unemployment system, the broken unemployment system, is that it was designed to fail by the Scott regime in the legislature about 10, 12 years ago when they redesigned the unemployment system. And it was designed to fail because they wanted to discourage people from applying so they could make their unemployment numbers look better. And they not only did they design a failed system, they made it the cheapest system in the country. It provides for, I think, $275 per week. That's the lowest in the country, and for a minimum of 12 weeks, which is the lowest amount of weeks allowed. And what you need to do, well, number one, is to increase the monthly payout, or the weekly payout, rather, and get it up so that a family can survive on the unemployment compensation until the breadwinners can find new work. Number two, it has to last long enough, because if you think about it, the unemployment system usually kicks in during a recession, like now, when people lose their jobs and the economy breaks down and there are no jobs to be had. And it takes a while for recessions to start bottoming out and then going up and starting creating jobs. So we need at least 12 months of unemployment compensation. What you're going to see now is that since the $600 per week additional compensation has ended, and Florida has ended the $300 per week supplement that was done by executive order, you're going to see a huge drop of money coming into the economy. And so we're going to see even fewer workers working because, excuse me, as you decrease the money supply, there's three actors in the economy. You have consumers, you have who spend money and buy goods and services. You have businesses who sell goods and services, and you have the government that actually employs a ton of people, federal, state, local, and spends money. And when businesses and people stop spending money, which is what happens, government has to step in and with payments so that the economy keeps moving. They step in with unemployment insurance. They step in with increased assistance to families for food stamps, things of that nature. So when we see that big drop, we not only have workers not working, we have businesses not hiring, and we're going to have a government not spending money through these unemployment checks. So we're going to see a big drop off. What we're going to need to do is to fix the unemployment system. I'm in favor of, for example, allowing mail-in applications. Right now, you can only apply online for unemployment compensation. I want to change that so you can mail it in. I also want to change it so that you can actually walk into a state building and sit down face-to-face with somebody and apply for unemployment compensation with a handwritten application. So you can meet with somebody, see somebody face-to-face, and they can answer your questions. So you don't get sent to a phone system. That, you know, if you're hold on, speak Spanish 1, speak English 2, hold on. If you want to talk to somebody about your check, press 1. If you want to talk to somebody about a job, press 2. We don't need that. We need face-to-face people contact to get questions answered so that, you know, Florida goes back to becoming, the government goes back to becoming a service for its residents, as opposed to viewing its residents as a burden to the government. You know, that's what government is for. Government is to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of its citizens. Unfortunately, what you see is what happens when you elect representatives to govern you who don't believe in government, who think government should be so small you should drown it in a bathtub. This is what happens. They drown government in a bathtub, and we have no services. We have no health system. We have no unemployment system. They made government so small that it is not responsive to the people. Thank you.
Absolutely, yeah, and of course, this pandemic is absolutely unprecedented. These issues are being presented in a light in which we are not familiar with. So new problems require new solutions. So thank you for sharing your vision with us. To close out this segment, I will turn to Jim Carroll with a question. What would you do to be responsive to specific needs of constituents in House District 85?
Sure. Well, I'm running because I enjoy the opportunity to help make people's lives better. And this job would give me those opportunities. As an attorney, I've represented people who can't afford one. During COVID, I've helped distribute food and helped people with their COVID testing and results. Sometimes it's a tough thing to navigate. I've worked to try to help a community get its eroding beaches replenished. I've helped support a community that challenged development inconsistent with its identity. I've attended many meetings of local government entities and citizens organizations in the district and contacted many HOAs and POAs to learn their issues and ascertain their particular needs. And by the way, I didn't see my opponent at any of these meetings over the last year on Zoom or live before that. And in that connection, I would note that my opponent does not live in the district. We're talking about the district here. And his sugar growing operation is outside the district. And about 97% of his campaign financial support is from outside the district. I am part of the district. I'm involved in our district, and I'll work full time to meet the particular needs of our citizens, both in the district as well as in Tallahassee. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I have to say, I am especially protective over House District 85. My mother is a constituent in that House district, and you definitely have her vote. So
I'll try to do a good job for her and tell her to call me anytime.
Thank you. That's very generous. So thank you to Mayor Jim Bonfiglio running for House District 89 and Jim Carroll running for House District 85 to join us for tonight's program. And thank you to all of our Democrats who joined us tonight. And one last big thank you to all of our viewers who turned in tonight to meet our candidates. We'll see you next week.